Kings, Chronicles, Samuel. Second Samuel. Is that where we are?
Against Samuel, I think so.
We've made it into the kings of the Hebrew scriptures, specifically the kingdom divided. Here we are coming up towards the end of October, and the narrative lectionary keeps on moving. Adrienne, how are you feeling for this coming Sunday and all the pieces that this narrative lectionary text brings with it?
Um, it's perfect for these times. I don't know if there's probably ever a time in human history when this text doesn't work. We're talking about division, we're talking about power, we're talking about like who gets to be top dog. Um, all of the things that I think humans have been wrestling with since the beginning of time. So, given what's happening in Palestine, Israel, given what's happening close to our own homes with upcoming elections, possibly even given what's happening in people's families and their workplaces and schools, there's often and always this struggle with power and how it's wielded, who gets caught in the crossfires, how we justify it, the means and the ends, all of that is in this Sunday's text.
So this Sunday's text, it has us in, I don't know where it's from. I know the story. It is in uh, Kings, Chronicles, Samuel. Second Samuel. Is that where we are?
Against Samuel, I think so.
Yeah. It's the Jeroboam Rehoboam split. So this is the portion where the kingdom gets divided. We had David last week for a hot minute. He was doing some dancing and rocking out to some music. And now we are in 1 Kings chapter 12. So we skipped the whole story of Solomon. Sorry, Solomon, you have some fun pieces, but not this year's narrative lectionary. And now, essentially, this little snippet in the grand narrative sets up just where the kingdom is going, where we had seen, coming out of Egypt with Moses and all that good stuff, a little bit of David, and now this is where Israel and Judah kind of split paths as two separate entities, and never again shall they meet, essentially.
Never
And you
again.
get Rehoboam and Jeroboam, two
Correct.
essentially different leaders. One is the descendant of Solomon. The other is kind of this rogue, other people's choice populist president kind of a thing, I guess. And all we really get here is the split. What's interesting, though, and this is where the power piece really comes in, the rulers are saying, you have the chance to choose what kind of leader you're going to be. Are you going to be a fair and kind leader? And he's like, no, I'm just going to be even worse. I'm going to be just the worst kind of leader, and just goes down that path. And then Jeroboam doesn't really do much better with his little, coup. He's like, let's set up some false idols and put them at Bethel and all these important places in Abraham's story and just worship false gods.
Yeah.
So an
It's a hot
interesting
mess.
next step. Yeah.
It's a hot mess. The other thing that just struck me, so two things. You mentioned the kingdom has been divided, never to be together again, which is where we're living right now in the Middle East. As we're thinking
Yeah.
about Gaza and we're thinking about Israel, we're thinking about Palestinian siblings and all the folks who make up that land, which is actually much more diverse than what we hear on the news. That is a sad and heartbreaking commentary that out of the pages of the Hebrew Bible to the front pages of our newspapers, this story is still raging
Yeah.
today. The other thing that is interesting to me, the last 3 weeks, we've been dealing with relatively young leaders. So, I said in Children's Sabbath, Ruth is not a whole lot older than our teenagers when she married,
Yeah.
about the age of Mary. Then we've got David, a young king that we looked at last week. And then this week we've got this king who's being advised by the advisors of his father. The wise elders are advising. And then he's got his young advisors, who are the ones who are like, if your dad was tough, dude, you need to be even tougher. There should be more power. There's this whole thing about there's more power in my little finger than there was in my father's loins, which of course is this sexual connotation to basically a pissing contest. In the Hebrew Bible, it's so bizarre. But how, from that time again to this time, it's like the same story keeps getting played out. People, leaders, men, I think even women now, definitely women now in power, having these pissing contests about who's going to be the toughest.
So I always like to think the power of the Bible is not arguing whether or not it actually happened historically, because that's a whole other thing. It's the way in which the stories keep happening today.
Right.
And
Right.
that's exactly what you said, from the pages of the Hebrew scriptures to the front pages of our newspaper,
Right.
not to mention just what's happening in our own country in America, in our own family systems, probably in
Yeah.
some churches. Maybe there's
Probably.
conflict. Does conflict ever happen in churches? Is that a thing? I don't know.
I heard that it did. I don't think it does at Riverside, but I think there's probably conflict everywhere else except where we are. I think the other interesting thing, the other interesting thing, as much as these stories repeat themselves and history repeats itself, there is always still God's invitation to do a different thing. I love when I call my dad and I say, "Hey, Pop," I call my dad, "Pop, how are you doing?" And he says, "I'm still here." And then the next thing he almost always says is, "I've got a chance." And I love that. Like I've got a chance to do something different this morning, right? I have this opportunity to wield power or to be crushingly cruel to people, or I can make a different choice. And I feel like that also, from the pages of the Hebrew Bible to our front pages, our dinner tables, our church council meetings, our committee meetings, we have a chance to do something different, to use our power in service to the people who are laboring under crushing realities.
Why is it that power corrupting seems to be what just happens on accident, and power to heal and unify takes so much work?
Yeah.
Why is that seem to be the case? Or am I just reading the world with a pessimistic lens?
No, I think you're right. But I think when we look at our human origin story, I mean, you can look at like original people on the earth and just how mean life was. You know, you could be dead in a
Mm,
minute if you didn't, if you weren't constantly aware. So we know about, I mean, I can go into the whole psychology of the reptilian brain, but we're wired to protect
yeah.
ourselves, to protect our flank. Then you add to that the harm done to different people groups, what happened to European people in the medieval ages, and the torture, the Inquisitions, and you know the bringing of that to America, and then how that was visited on enslaved Africans and
Yeah.
visited on indigenous people. But then you get the way queer people are treated in church, the way women have been abused and taken advantage of, the way we don't really care about children. So
Yeah.
everyone is like, you know, twitchy and watching their flank and expecting someone to harm them. And then, of course, those expectations play out for real
Yeah.
for some people. And so I think we get in places where, you know, it makes sense that we've got ours and we're going to make sure we keep it and we
Yep.
mobilize our power so that nobody can hurt us again. I really think at the root of what goes on with power are scared, hurt people who are trying to make sure that no one can scare them or hurt them again.
Yeah, it's that sense of we're still stuck in our biology. No
Yeah,
matter how much our technology evolves so fast around us,
right.
our brains and our bodies just take a while to catch up. And you know, it's a recent phenomenon on the history of Earth for humans to have societies as large as we do. I think, what is it? You can only even connect with like, there's some limited number of people that you can really feasibly connect with in a community, like
Hmm.
150 people max or something. And you
Yeah.
know, our once upon a time, tribes were these small bands of Homo sapiens protecting themselves, and we
Right.
still have that reptilian brain driving a lot of the ship. So it's just at a larger scale with larger consequences, and we're still just reeling as a result.
Yes, and we've got this frontal cortex, so we have
Yes.
evolved, right? And I
Yes.
think that is the hope. And I think, you know, for Christians, our hope is in Jesus. And the reason we gather in our tribes and in our communities on Sunday morning is to practice overriding the
Yes.
reptilian brain. It's how the Samaritan is able to help someone who's not from their tribe. It's how
Yeah.
Jesus changes his mind about the Syrophoenician woman and goes from, "I didn't come for you," to, "Daughter, your faith has
Yeah.
made you well."
Mm.
It's how we, in meditation, in prayer, you know, in the embodied practices that we're doing, can, as the yogis say, get up off the mat and take that meditative, compassionate
Yep.
connection to all that is into the world, because we can do it. I mean,
We
you
can
know,
do it.
actors like the Buddha, like Jesus, like Muhammad. There are people in the world, Mother Teresa, and we elevate those people so much often to the point where we think that would never be me. But they were ordinary people. You know, King. I'm reading a lot about King right now in the Taylor Branch book, Parting the Waters. Stunning, stunning book. You can see why he won the Pulitzer. But these are ordinary people. I mean, these are children who helped to
Yeah.
lead the civil rights movement. It was washerwomen and Pullman car porters who were doing magnificent things. They were regular moms and dads and sons and daughters, children of God. So we can do it, and that is
Yeah.
the invitation every day. I've got another chance. I got another chance.
Yep. That is so beautiful. It's knowing that the lizard in the back of my mind is always doing something, but the prefrontal cortex also has as a conversation partner, and we have the opportunity to rewire ourselves and to evolve as a society. And we
Totally.
see these individuals, and I love how you remind us they're ordinary people. We often give them this divine status that, like, oh, I can never be that. They're all saints, right? It's like, nope. They were all born. They all, ate food and went to the bathroom every morning, just like you. They were normal human beings who did extraordinary things, which means you can do extraordinary things too.
Yes, and Jesus says that in I
Yeah.
think it's Gospel, John's Gospel, even greater things than this.
Yeah.
He's calling us to, and that's extraordinary. I think to start your day thinking Jesus said I could do even greater things than he did. Wow, what marching orders for us. So in this place of division and power, how did Jesus walk into a space? Because I think another problem that we have is denying that we've got power. We all have power in certain places and pockets. It may just be in our family, it may be in our friend circle. We may not be the president of a country or the senior minister of a church. And I actually question how much power I have. I'm not so sure. But we do have power. We do have influence. And I think Resma Menakem is the one who talks about power, and there's another quality, but how one is the steering wheel and one is the brakes. And you want to balance those two things. And I honestly cannot remember what the other thing is. But we all have that. We all have constituencies that we can mobilize, people that we can inspire with our words and our actions. And so the question is, like Jesus, how will you use the power that you have for the good
Yeah.
of people who are powerless in a space where you have influence?
And it's why stories like this are so needed still. And I
Yes.
love that they're included in the Hebrew
Yes.
scriptures because they're not all the success stories of it all going right. It's these stories of it going completely wrong,
Completely
which
wrong.
reminds us, like, oh, check yourself or you're headed in the same direction. Or do you
Yeah.
see yourself in this story? You're not
Yeah.
always a David, man after God's heart. Sometimes you're the Rehoboam, Jeroboam, completely having pissing contests and just
Right.
messing the whole thing up.
Yeah.
Where are you in the story? And it's not too late to get that prefrontal cortex doing something to course correct and use power in these appropriate ways for the healing of all rather than the hurt of far too many.
Right. And the healing of ourselves. So when you said check
Yes.
yourself, I thought you were going to quote, I don't know which rapper it was,
You better check yourself or you wreck yourself.
but the check yourself before you wreck yourself. Maybe you'll find that snippet and slide it in. But yeah, I mean, because what we're doing that's causing harm to other people, of course, is harming us as well.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
healing of the nations means us too. Yeah.
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 So, okay, let's go back to your sermon just for a minute. How are you going to just handle conflict and power from the pulpit? Like, do you have a sense of how you're going to navigate that the world? I think we can all get a handle on Israel, Palestine. There's a lot to talk about there. But then it comes personal to our individual lives. Thanksgiving is coming. That's always a time when power and conflict is present. But then just, churches in general being a place where power and conflict might happen. How are you going to engage Riverside in this? And how might other pastors and preachers overhear this to think, ooh, I'm going to borrow that kind of path for what I'm going to do too?
Well, I've already titled the sermon, and I'm calling it Acting Human, because there is something extraordinarily human about the way the characters in this scripture play out their story. I want to really try to help people to enter into the story and to see themselves in these characters and to understand that the way they're acting is not an opportunity for us to go, oh, look at Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Those guys were terrible. But to go, wow, there's a piece of that in me. And I think I'm often trying when I'm preaching to invite us, I think as you just said, like, where are you in this story? We've done that with David as badly as he has acted in certain parts of the Bible, he's also been just stellar in other parts. That is extraordinarily human. And I think if we can connect ourselves to these folks who do these things that are reprehensible or distasteful, I think it helps to build compassion for ourselves, but also compassion for the folks that we are in these struggles with. That's where I find I guess the healing for me, because I certainly have been in power struggles with folks in a variety of areas in my life. When I read these types of stories and allow myself to, be humble enough to say that could be me or that has been me, I have a lot more compassion for myself, and therefore I've got more compassion for the folks who are visiting that energy upon me as well.
Well, as always, this sermon's gonna take us to the broadest strokes of the front pages of the news to the most personal strokes of our individual experiences and lives and psychologies, and then the various environments we find ourselves in. So
Well,
it's going to be good. So,
I hope. We never
well,
know.
we never know. You never know.
The
Well,
day after.
that's always the test. Like, how did that feel the next day? Yeah, and
Right.
the beauty of preaching is you're going to do it again in 7 days. And it's this constant, ongoing conversation. It's like, I don't play baseball, but it's like you're just hitting solid base hits week after week after week. Once in a while you might hit a home run, but the goal is just to keep getting on base. And over time, how does this form individuals and communities as we talk about all these aspects? And like you constantly bring up, it's the embodiment and what's happening in our bodies, and how preaching is embedded in pastoral care. And there's so much
Oh,
of
for
that in
sure.
what you're saying in all of this, and that forms us so deeply.
So deeply. And I love what you said about 7 days, you've got another chance, because it spins me back to my pop again. How you doing, Pop? I'm alive. I still got a chance, right? So we
Yep.
still have another chance 7 days from now, preachers, to get it right or to get it better. And that is good news.
Yeah. Well, as always, we'd love to hear all of your thoughts, questions, comments, ideas. Where does this kingdom divided text take you? What's stirred up in you when you think about power and conflict in the Bible, in our world, in your own family systems and individual lives? Drop a comment below. We always love to hear what you have to say. You are phenomenal human beings, and you should all join us for worship on Sunday. You can join us in the building right there in New York City, Upper West Side, West Harlem, or online wherever you get an internet signal, trcnyc.org. You can watch it anytime. That's the beauty of the internet. So we look forward to where this conversation will take us, and it is inevitably going to be rich and wonderful. And I can't wait to hear it too in a few days.